The napkin clung to my palm because my skin was damp, and I understood that if I dropped it, they would move me through the service door and I would not return. I threaded between tables with a tray that felt heavier than the bottle on it. The room breathed in low murmurs and polished silver. Bellavita carried the smell of salt like a bruise, the harbor pressing its breath through the vents. I had learned the routes a server walks when she wants to be invisible. Skirt the mirror, ride the shadow of the wine wall, keep your smile a thin line. I did all of it, and still the room saw me. 4 names lived against my tongue like stitches. Girls from bars along Wharf Street. Each gone before sunrise. Each last card charge stamped near this address. My editor had called my obsession a career suicide note. Later they called it a suspension. I called it the only thing that kept me from sleeping through another missing person alert. I did not wear my press badge tonight. I wore a borrowed apron and a lie. Barolo for 9, the floor captain said without looking at my face. I carried the bottle to the corner table with the empty 5th chair. 4 men had arranged themselves so they could watch the door without seeming to. The man with his back to the brick never fidgeted. He made stillness look like a language. The others deferred without noticing. His suit was unremarkable until you tried to imagine him in anything else. He didn't need to speak to make the air near him cautious. Dominic Hale had that effect in articles. Now I watched it work in a room. I set the bottle down, braced the corkscrew, and pretended my hand did not tremble. The cork sighed. The glass leaned. The men gave me half smiles shaped like warnings. I tipped the bottle and kept the surface unbroken. My reflection in the liquid looked like someone who had almost convinced herself this was routine. "First week?" one of them said. "First long day," I answered. His napkin slid to the floor. The grin suggested I pick it up. I bent because refusing would be louder than obedience. When I straightened, the kitchen door had opened for a moment and 2 busboys stepped through. Their aprons were too clean, their eyes set too heavy. One crooked his finger at me as if he were calling a dog. The door swung and swallowed the gesture with the heat. My pulse climbed my throat. I swallowed it back. I needed a reason to cross the floor without following those boys. I needed air that wasn't owned by men with rubber soles and clipped voices. I also needed evidence, a name on a manifest, a face I could point to and say, "He did it," and no one could make the sentence smaller. The man at the head of 9 lifted his glass and glanced at the napkin under my hand. His gaze didn't rest anywhere long, but the weight of it made my skin cooler. He was not leering. He was counting. Entrances. Exits. The places a person could be erased in under a minute. I recognized the math because I did it too. I slid the pen from my apron and hid the movement behind the bottle. The cotton felt thin as a throat. I wrote 4 letters small enough to be mistaken for wine silt. I left the folded square by his glass, the edge just touching the ring of condensation, as if I were guarding the tablecloth from a stain. I walked away. The busboys stepped toward the hall that led to the alley. The maitre d' asked for help with a 6-top. I nodded and did not change direction. A couple laughed too brightly, the sound of people sure they were safe. My tray turned into a shield I could not lift high enough. "She's with me," a voice said, even and unhurried. I looked back. Dominic Hale had not raised his volume. He didn't need to. The floor captain adjusted his tie as if that could make authority belong to him again. The busboys stopped. Dominic wiped the rim of his glass with his thumb, considered the napkin, folded it, and set it in his jacket pocket like a receipt he might need later. He did not look at me as he rose. He didn't touch my arm. He simply started toward the corridor beside the wine wall, and the staff made space the way water does when a hull cuts through it. "Reserve room," he told the captain. "She has the key." I did not, but the captain nodded as if the story were old. I followed. The corridor narrowed, and the cold that seeped from the old brick made my skin feel new. Bottles slept behind black iron. The sound of the room softened to a purr. I knew cameras watched the main hall. I also knew they did not watch this one. In cities like ours, privacy lived in the seams. "Do not run," he said without turning. "Running convinces men who want to misread the world." "I prefer accuracy," I said. "You wrote a word that does not allow for ambiguity," he said. "That is why we are talking in a corridor instead of a morgue." "We are not talking yet," I said. He opened a dull brass door with a key only owners carried, then stopped on the threshold and faced me. Up close, the age in his eyes looked earned, not fashionable. He could pass for gentle if you didn't listen to the silences. "You are Elena Voss," he said. "Your paper does not sign your checks this month." "Suspensions come with savings if you don't eat," I said. "I have questions and a good memory." "Memory is dangerous," he said. "It puts a leash on men who don't believe in collars." Quote, "Including you?" I asked. Including the man who wants you outside by the bins, he said. Answer me. Why did you show me that? 4 girls, I said. They entered nights like this and didn't leave them. Your logo sits on crates near where they were last seen. He did not flinch at the accusation. I do not ship people, he said. I bury men who try. Then we want the same name, I said. Give it to me. Names are currency, he said. You pay with breath, with sleep, with whoever you thought you were before you say them out loud. You sound practiced, I said. I am, he said, which is why you will leave with me now. I will put you somewhere no one knows. You will not argue on the sidewalk. On the sidewalk, arguments look like permission. Why me? I asked. He tapped his jacket where the napkin lay folded. Because you asked, he said. And because men who ignore certain words do not live long. Quote. We stepped through the door into a small stairwell that smelled of stone and cold wine. He took the steps like someone who had measured them before and found them useful. At the bottom, he listened, then opened to another hall that exhaled lemons and old wood. The exit door sighed into the alley. The night met us with a wet chill. A black sedan idled with its lights down. The driver watched the rear view without blinking. Home, Dominic said as we slid into the back. He met my eyes, not hers. The city thinned as we drove. Warehouses passed like sleeping beasts, their corrugated hides catching the occasional orange from a lone street lamp. Fog lifted off the river in strands that looked like writing I couldn't read. I realized I had stopped shaking only when my teeth no longer clicked on the word I was trying not to say out loud. I'm not a damsel, I said. I'm not a hero, he said. What are you? I asked. A man who keeps his rules, he said. And one of them is this. When someone asks for help, I answer before the world decides it's too late. What does help look like to you? I asked. He turned his face to the window as if the glass could keep a secret. A place, he said. A door that shuts and holds. And after that? I said. After that, truth, he said, but not in public. Public truth kills quietly. You didn't say the name of the man outside by the bins, I said. You don't need his name tonight, he said, almost gentle. You need air. The driver aimed us toward the river road where the dark stitched itself tighter. I pressed my fingers together until the ache steadied me. I thought of the 4 girls whose birthdays required no candles now. I thought of the sister I could not pull back from a decade ago. I thought of the napkin pressed warm against his chest. Will you keep that word? I asked. He let a small silence sit before answering, like a man counting his own pulse. If you will keep breathing, he said, I'll keep everything else. The rain had not stopped when the car left the main road. It fell in long, thin threads, almost invisible until the headlights caught them. The city lights died behind us. Only the rhythm of the wipers filled the car. Dominic did not speak. His silence was not the kind that waited for comfort. It was the kind that built walls between breaths. I watched his reflection in the glass, trying to guess which part of him decided I was worth saving. We turned through a rusted gate marked with no number. The house beyond it sat on the lip of the river, half hidden by fog and ivy. It looked abandoned from the outside, windows black, roof shining wet. But when the car stopped, the porch light bloomed as if someone had been watching the road for us. The driver disappeared with the car. Dominic motioned for me to follow. My shoes sank in the gravel. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and faint tobacco. A single lamp lit the front room, a table, a couch, a record player, no pictures. It felt less like a home and more like a place that borrowed warmth, only when someone needed hiding. Sit, he said. I didn't. Where am I? Outside Havenport's reach, he said. For a few hours, that's the safest direction you can move. And what happens after a few hours? You decide whether to trust me, he said. And I decide if your story kills people. I folded my arms. You think I write to kill? I think you write to reveal, he said. The result is the same. He poured whiskey into 2 glasses. The amber caught the lamplight, and I realized my hands were still trembling. He noticed, too. He pushed 1 glass toward me but didn't sit. Drink, he said. It keeps you steady when the truth hits hard. I didn't touch it. The truth about what? He leaned against the table, arms crossed. The man behind the crates you keep chasing, Rico Moretti. We grew up on the same streets. He liked control more than he liked air. He runs the containers you've been following. The missing girls, the drugs, the debts, all of it. He used my roots because no one questions my paperwork. Why tell me this? I asked. If you're innocent, why hide me instead of calling the police? He smiled without humor. Because police sell their silence cheaper than fear. And because you already wrote help. That word makes me responsible. He took a slow breath. 10 years ago, my wife went missing. Rico sold her across the water before I knew what she was worth to him. By the time I found her, there was nothing left to bring home. Since then, I don't let his kind breathe in my city. You think I'm saving you for sympathy. I'm saving you because you saw his pattern. The room held its breath with me. The sound of the river against the wall was a steady pulse. You're saying Rico is the reason for all 4 disappearances? He's the reason for more than 4, Dominic said. The others never made it to your paper. I sat down slowly. The couch was rough wool, the color of old smoke. So what happens now? He came closer, setting a folder on the table between us. Inside were photos containers at the harbor, serial numbers, shipping manifests. In one corner, a symbol, 42A. Beneath it, a date 2 nights from now. This shipment is scheduled for the docks tomorrow night, he said. Inside there are women, maybe 10, maybe 20. They move them like cargo to keep records clean. I can stop the truck, but not without proof. You said you wanted truth. Here it is. Help me show them. I stared at the photos until the lines blurred. And what do you want in return? Silence until it's over, he said. If you tell anyone, they'll vanish the evidence before we reach it. Quote, you expect me to trust a man who keeps a cellar full of secrets? You walked into it, he said quietly. You could have screamed. You didn't. Maybe you already decided. I looked up at him. I decided I'm tired of writing obituaries disguised as articles. He smiled then, not warmth, but something close to respect. Then we understand each other. The sound of footsteps broke the quiet. A young woman stepped into the room. Her hair was damp, her face pale and sharp. She couldn't have been more than 20. A bruise bloomed along her jaw. She froze when she saw me, then looked to Dominic for permission to breathe. It's all right, he said. This is Elena. She's not one of them. The girl nodded but stayed near the doorway. You found her, she said softly, voice shaking. The one he said would come. Dominic looked at me. This is Ava, he said. She came out of one of Rico's containers 2 months ago. She's the only one who escaped alive. Quote, Ava stepped forward, eyes flicking to mine. He said you could help, she whispered. He said you're not afraid to look. I wanted to tell her that fear never leaves, it just changes shape, but the words died. I reached out instead. Her hand was cold, bones like bird wings. I'll help, I said. Ava's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Then hurry, she said. He's still looking for me. Dominic handed me another folder. She knows the schedule. Tomorrow, the truck leaves from Pier 11. Midnight. That's your window. I flipped through the papers, maps, times, names. How do you get this information? He hesitated, then said, There are men who owe me debts. Some debts collect themselves. Will Reed believe any of this? I asked. He's the only federal agent who ever called me back. Dominic's expression changed, a trace of irony. Reed doesn't believe. He calculates. But he hates Rico more than he hates me, which makes him useful. Quote, And if Reed betrays us? Then you'll write the ending, Dominic said. Because I won't have the chance. The rain softened outside. The lamp flickered, throwing our shadows long and thin across the floorboards. Ava sat on the couch, wrapping a blanket around herself, watching the window like the night might knock. You should sleep, Dominic said to her. She shook her head. I only sleep when the tide's high. It hides the sound. He didn't argue. He turned back to me. In 48 hours, either we stop Rico or he adds new names to your list. Decide if you're part of that story. I nodded. I'm already in it. He moved toward the door. There's a room upstairs. You'll find clothes, a recorder, and a loaded gun. Pick the one that makes you feel safer. I watched him leave. The house groaned in the wind. Ava whispered something in her language, a prayer maybe. I lay back on the couch, listening to the river touch the walls. Somewhere beneath the floor, I heard the slow creak of a door closing, like the sound of trust beginning its dangerous work. The first light came slow through the fog, pale and colorless, brushing the edges of the curtains. I hadn't slept. The sound of the river moved under the floor like a low heartbeat, steady, unwilling to stop for anyone's pain. Upstairs, the house creaked, as if remembering what it used to be before secrets filled its rooms. I sat in a borrowed sweater that smelled faintly of smoke and cedar, holding the recorder Dominic had left on the table. The red light blinked like an impatient pulse. When the door opened, he was already dressed. Clean shirt, sleeves rolled. No tie, no trace of the blood I'd wiped from his hand the night before. He looked like the sort of man who didn't need rest because control gave him energy. You didn't use the bed, he said. It didn't look like a place meant for dreams. I answered. He smiled without humor. This house was built for silence, not comfort. I switched off the recorder. You hide here often? When business requires discretion. He poured coffee from a metal pot. And when the city gets loud with police questions. Havenport likes to pretend its ghosts are workers on night shift. He handed me a cup. The coffee was strong enough to feel like armor. What about you? He asked. You don't look like someone who hides well. Quote. I've been hiding for years, I said. Behind articles, behind evidence that won't speak. I'm good at it. You call that journalism? I call it survival. He nodded slowly. Then we're alike in the worst way. Ava appeared at the doorway, her hair damp, wrapped in a clean sweater that looked too large for her. She moved quietly, carrying a plate of toast, eyes avoiding mine until she sat down. I dreamed of the crates again, she said softly, not looking at anyone. Dominic's tone softened. You're safe here. Until tonight, she said. He never forgets. Her words hung between us. I wanted to ask what she saw when she closed her eyes, but decided not to pull her back there. The way her fingers tightened on the bread told me enough. Dominic spread out the harbor maps on the table. The paper edges were worn, smudged with grease and pen marks. He pointed to a cluster of red circles near the south dock. These are Rico's loading points. He rotates them so no pattern shows, but the numbers on his manifests tell the story. The shipment marked 42A leaves at midnight. We need proof before it moves. And how do we get it? I asked. I still have people at the port, men who drive for him but don't like where the cargo ends up. He drew an X over one lane. They'll look the other way when we pass. You'll use your camera. I'll make sure the cameras that matter are blind. Quote, you trust these men? I don't trust anyone, he said. But fear is a reliable motivator. Ava looked up. What if he knows you're helping? He already knows, Dominic said. He just doesn't believe I'll break my own code. What code is that? I asked. He glanced at me. No human cargo. Not in my city. Not under my name. The rest gambling, debts, protection, that's the noise you tolerate to keep order. And what if the order itself is wrong, I said. Then you build a better one, he said simply. But not tonight. He folded the maps carefully, as if every crease could change fate. We move at 2300. You stay close to me. Speak to no one. The second you pull that camera, the clock starts. And after? He looked toward the window where the fog thinned just enough to show the outline of cranes by the river. After, you decide what truth is worth publishing. Ava stood and went to the window. He'll smell us, she whispered. Rico always knows when someone is coming. Dominic walked over, touched her shoulder gently. Let him smell fear if he wants. We'll give him fire instead. I watched them, a man and a girl linked by ghosts. For the first time I understood that his war wasn't business, it was penance. The thought unsettled me. Penance never ends. It only changes form. After breakfast, Dominic led me to the back of the house where a door opened into a narrow passage leading under the foundation. The air was cold, metallic. Rows of filing boxes lined the walls, labeled by year. This is where I keep my leverage, he said. Every deal, every man who thought he could hide his dirt. If I fall, this burns first. I ran my fingers over the labels' names I recognized from politics, law, charity boards. You keep evidence like a reporter, I said. I keep it like a survivor, he said. Stories don't save you. Power does. Then why help me? I have none. You have reach, he said, and you still believe words matter. I forgot that once. He stopped before a small safe and opened it. Inside lay a single photo Dominic with a woman in a white dress, laughing under sunlight. It was the only color in the room. He shut the safe before I could ask. Her name was Mara, he said quietly. She liked rain. I said nothing. The silence did what comfort couldn't. We returned upstairs. Ava had fallen asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled to her chin. Dominic looked down at her and said, almost to himself, she shouldn't have survived that container. Sometimes I wonder if survival is the harder punishment. Maybe survival is the only justice, I said. He looked at me then, eyes dark, unreadable. Justice, he said, is a word that dies easily in the mouth. Don't let it die in yours. I nodded. Then we stop him. Coste. The clock on the wall ticked slow, deliberate, like it wanted us to hear time moving. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the air sharp and clean. Dominic handed me a small earpiece. Tonight you'll hear me, even when you can't see me, he said. If you lose my voice, you run. I don't run easily, I said. Then practice, he answered. Night doesn't forgive the brave. He started toward the door, then turned back. Elena, he said quietly, if something happens to me, make sure Ava never goes back to the city. She deserves to start somewhere the sea can't find her. I'll keep her safe, I said. He nodded once, the kind of nod a man gives when he's already written his own ending. Then he disappeared into the gray morning, leaving me with a map, a recorder, and the weight of promises that didn't belong to me. I sat by the window, watching the river roll past, and whispered to the empty room, "If truth costs blood, I hope mine is enough." Ava didn't speak for a long time. She sat on the edge of the couch, knees drawn close, the blanket wrapped so tight it looked like armor. The fog outside pressed against the windows until the glass turned pale and opaque. Every sound in the house felt amplified: the ticking clock, the soft creak of floorboards, the faint hum of the refrigerator that shouldn't have comforted anyone, but somehow did. Dominic poured tea into a chipped mug and set it on the table near her hand. She didn't reach for it. He didn't insist. His movements were quiet, deliberate, as if noise itself could frighten her. I watched from the other side of the room, notebook open, recorder ready, though part of me didn't know if I wanted her to start talking. The moment she did, the world would change. When she finally lifted her head, her voice came out small, and even, as if she were reading a script she'd practiced in her mind. There were 21 of us, maybe 22. I couldn't count anymore after the lights went off. Her fingers trembled as she spoke. Dominic leaned back against the wall, arms folded, eyes lowered. I realized he was holding his breath. Ava continued, her words slow, measured. "They told us we were going to work at a hotel. Free board, free food. They took our phones at the border. They said it was safer. The first night we were in a warehouse near the docks. The next morning a man came tall, with gloves. He didn't speak English. He had a tattoo." Her voice faltered, and I stepped closer. "What kind of tattoo?" She rubbed her wrist, tracing invisible lines. "A small crown, with 3 points. He said that meant we belonged to him." The next thing I remember was the smell: metal, oil, sweat. We were inside the container. The air got thick fast. When someone cried, they hit the walls to make us stop. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Dominic's jaw tightened. I saw the flicker of rage he didn't allow to surface. "Ava went on, softer now." One girl, Mira, she tried to talk to me. She said she came from Jersey, had a baby boy. She said if we ever got out, we should remember each other's names so we wouldn't disappear twice. She didn't wake up on the third day. I felt something tighten in my chest. I wanted to reach across the distance and hold her, but I stayed still, letting her finish at her pace. "How did you escape?" I asked. She looked at Dominic. "He found me," she said. He didn't deny it. "Her container was intercepted on my route," he said quietly. "The driver owed me money. I opened the door and found bodies. She was alive." Ava's eyes flicked between us. He told me to forget his name. I couldn't. The air hung thick with the weight of everything unsaid. I turned off the recorder. "I don't know how you managed to keep breathing," I told her. She gave me a small, brittle smile. "You don't stop breathing. You just forget it hurts." Quote. Dominic poured himself a drink he didn't touch. "Rico's mark is the crown," he said. "He brands everything that belongs to him. Women, cargo, loyalty. When I killed the driver, I knew the mark would find me again." I looked at him. "Then this isn't just revenge." "No," he said. "It's correction." We sat in the half-light as the fog began to thin, the sound of the river louder now. I felt the line between us blur: the journalist and the criminal, the truth and the secret that keeps you alive. I asked Ava if she would let me record again. She nodded. Her eyes no longer looked empty. They looked focused. "You want proof," she said. "Then write this: tell them that even in the dark we remembered our names." I pressed the record button. Her voice steadied as she spoke, each word a small rebellion. She listed the names she could recall: Mira, Lonnie, Tessa, Hoa. 14 names in total. I wrote them down, every letter a heartbeat. When she finished, the room felt different, as if her words had made the air heavier but also clearer. Dominic picked up the recorder, turned it over in his hand, then gave it back to me. "Keep that safe," he said. "It's worth more than money." I nodded. "It's worth the truth." He looked out the window toward the cranes. "Truth doesn't pay for coffins," he said. Ava spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "He knows I'm alive, Rico. I dream of him standing outside, watching." "He won't touch you," Dominic said. "Not while I'm breathing." "You can't watch forever," she said. "Then I'll make sure he runs out of time first." The promise in his tone was colder than the rain outside. I believed him. As evening approached, I helped Ava settle in a small room upstairs. The walls smelled of salt and pine. She curled beneath a blanket, murmured something in a language I didn't know. I stood there longer than I should have, listening to her breathing even out. When I came back down, Dominic was at the window, the last light of day cutting a sharp line across his face. She's stronger than she looks, I said. So were the others, he answered. Until they weren't. He turned toward me. 48 hours. That's all we have before the next shipment leaves. You and I will get the evidence tonight. I hesitated. And if we fail? His eyes met mine. Then Havenport will forget her too. Outside, the first crane lights flickered on, painting the fog in slow, sickly gold. I thought of the girls whose names I had written down. I thought of my sister's voice in the dark. I closed my notebook and whispered, "Then we don't fail." He nodded once, the decision already made. At midnight, we go to the harbor. The rain began again, tapping against the window like impatient fingers. The city waited. The river carried the sound away. And for a moment, I believed it might carry us too. The night tasted of metal and salt. We moved through Havenport's southern edge, where the cranes loomed like skeletons in the fog. The air was cold enough to bite through the seams of my coat. Dominic walked a few steps ahead, his movements quiet, confident, every gesture practiced. He had told me not to speak once we left the car, not to glance at the guards, not to hesitate. Hesitation looks like guilt, he had said, and guilt gets noticed. The harbor was never truly dark. Floodlights cut through the mist, catching the slick backs of shipping containers stacked like tombs. Their red paint gleamed faintly under the rain. Somewhere far off, a siren moaned a ship pulling out to sea, dragging its echo across the black water. We stopped behind a wall of crates. Dominic handed me a small earpiece. "You'll hear me through this," he whispered. "If I say quiet, you stop breathing until I say otherwise." "That's comforting," I murmured. He gave a ghost of a smile. "I don't do comfort. I do survival." He moved ahead first, melting into shadow. I followed, matching his steps, heart pounding too loud for my liking. We passed a row of containers marked with white stencils, serial numbers, ports of origin, inspection codes. My camera felt heavy in my pocket, its lens wrapped in a black cloth to hide the glint. A flashlight beam cut across the lane. We froze. 2 guards in reflective jackets stood near the chain-link gate, smoking, their laughter carried by the wind. Dominic waited until they turned away, then gestured for me to move. My breath came shallow and fast. He stopped beside one container, 42. Its numbers smeared with grime. "Here," he whispered. "This is the one." I crouched, pulled the camera out, and began recording. The lens caught the dripping steel, the lock, the barcode tag. My fingers were shaking so badly the image quivered. Dominic steadied my hand without looking at me. His touch was firm, almost impersonal, but it anchored me. A sound came from inside the container. Faint, muffled. Then again, a thump, weak and desperate. I froze. My throat went dry. Dominic's eyes flicked to mine, then to the metal door. "There's someone in there," I whispered. He didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched. "Keep filming," he said. "We need proof." Gwund. The noise came again, 2 knocks, then silence. I lifted the camera closer, focusing on the spot where the sound had come from. Dominic leaned in, pressing his ear to the cold surface. He nodded once, barely. "Alive," he said under his breath. "Then we open it," I said. He shook his head. "Not yet. If we break the seal, we lose our leverage. They'll move the rest before sunrise. We need the shipment intact for Reed." I wanted to argue, but something in his tone stopped me. He stepped back, pulled a small tracker from his pocket, and fixed it beneath the container's hinge. "Now they can't hide it," he said. The radio on one of the guards crackled. Footsteps, voices moving closer. Dominic grabbed my wrist and pulled me into the narrow gap between 2 stacks. My shoulder brushed cold metal. His hand stayed on mine, steadying my breath. The guard's flashlight beams sliced the fog just feet from us. "Area clear," one said. "Let's check the manifest list again." Quote. Their boots splashed through puddles, fading down the lane. I exhaled only when I felt Dominic's fingers loosen. He turned to me, voice low. "We have to leave. Now." We retraced our steps, keeping to the shadows. The cranes groaned overhead like tired giants. I could still hear the faint knocking from the container echoing in my chest, steady and small, like a heart refusing to stop. At the edge of the dock, Dominic stopped short. A figure stood by the exit gate, too still, too aware. Not a guard. He held a phone to his ear, talking quietly, eyes scanning the dark. Dominic's whisper brushed my ear. "That's Rico's man." "How do you know?" "Because I pay him," he said, "and he's not supposed to be here." The man's gaze swept over our hiding spot. I froze. Dominic reached behind his jacket and drew a small pistol, its surface black as water. He waited, listening. The man turned, walking toward the security office, Dominic lowered the gun but didn't put it away. He knows something, he murmured. Rico's nervous. He must have heard about Ava. I looked at him. Then she's in danger. She was always in danger, he said. Now it's just louder. We slipped through the side gate and into the empty street beyond the harbor. The fog swallowed the sound of our steps. Dominic kept walking without speaking until the car appeared from the shadows where his driver waited. Inside, the silence felt heavier than before. I stared at the camera in my lap, its tiny red light still blinking. There are people alive in that container, I said. We can't wait for paperwork. We have to go back. He didn't look at me. If we go back now, we die, and they die anyway. Rico has men watching every lane. You make it sound like numbers, I said. It is numbers, he replied quietly. I've learned to count survival before justice. I turned off the camera. Then maybe it's time someone stops counting. Quote. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then he said, You sound like Mara used to. Your wife? He nodded once. She thought the world could still be clean. She died proving it wasn't. The car turned down the river road. Lights from the harbor glowed behind us, blurred and distant. I stared at them until they disappeared, a smear of gold swallowed by gray. We have 20 hours, Dominic said. Reed meets us tomorrow. You'll give him your footage. Then we finish this. Quote. And after that? I asked. After that, truth stops hiding, he said. He looked out the window, and in the reflection I caught the flicker of something like sorrow before he shut it away. Neither of us spoke for the rest of the drive. The fog thickened again, wrapping the world in silence. But somewhere behind us, in container 42A, someone was still knocking. Morning arrived pale and uneasy, the light slipping through the fog like a secret trying to find its way in. The rain had stopped, but everything dripped the roof, the trees, the silence. I sat at the table in Dominic's kitchen, laptop open, camera connected, the video from the harbor replaying in small jerks of movement. Every sound seemed too loud in the still house. The whir of the fan, the steady tap of water outside, my own breathing. Dominic stood behind me watching. He hadn't spoken since we'd come back. His shirt sleeves were rolled up. His right arm was bandaged where a cut had reopened during the night. He smelled faintly of gun oil and rain. On the screen, the image flickered. Rows of containers, the number 42, A glinting in the floodlight, then the faint sound a knock, soft but unmistakable. My stomach twisted every time I heard it. There, I said quietly. That's proof. Dominic nodded once. It's enough for Reed. He took out his phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. A click, then a man's voice came through, steady, suspicious. You shouldn't be calling me from that line. I'm not, Dominic said. This isn't about me. It's about you wanting Rico. A pause. Who's with you? The reporter. Another pause, longer this time. Elena Voss? You're out of your mind. She's the reason you'll have your case, Dominic said evenly. The footage is clean. Location, timestamp, the sound of life inside a container. You wanted proof. You have it. Quote. Reed's sigh hissed through the speaker. You think I can just raid the docks because some camera caught a noise? Dominic's tone hardened. You'll do it because, if you don't, that footage goes public with your name in the credits. You're threatening a federal agent? No, Dominic said. I'm reminding one of his job. Reed's voice cooled. Midnight, Pier 11. If your intel is good, I'll be there. If not, you'll never find Rico alive, Dominic cut in. He'll run before you sign a warrant. Static filled the pause. Then Reed said, One night. Don't make me regret this. The line went dead. I turned to Dominic. You really think he'll come? He'll come, Dominic said. Men like Reed hate failure more than corruption. I closed the laptop, my hands still shaking. Then what? You hand him Rico and walk away? His eyes met mine. If I walk away, Rico will find another route. If I stay, Reed will find another target. Either way, someone dies. The air between us tightened. I wanted to say something. Anything that didn't sound naive, but the words wouldn't come. He studied me for a long moment, then said, You should rest. I can't. He walked toward the counter, poured coffee, and handed me a cup. His fingers brushed mine just enough to make my breath catch. You need to learn to wait, he said quietly. Waiting is what keeps people alive. And you? I asked. What keeps you alive? He didn't answer right away. Then softly, regret. We drank in silence. The air smelled of rain and something electric, the kind of tension that hums just before lightning. Later, in the living room, I found Ava sitting by the window. She was drawing on a scrap of paper, a map of the harbor from memory. She looked up as I approached. You found them, she said. The one still inside. We did, I said. But we have to wait until tonight. Her eyes darkened. Waiting is what kills people. I sat beside her. Sometimes waiting is the only way to make sure the right people die. She tilted her head, studying me. You sound like him. I didn't deny it. I felt the same steel growing under my words, the same quiet anger. Dominic entered the room, jacket over his arm, his voice steady. I'm going to meet someone. Stay here, both of you. Where? I asked. Just a contact, he said. Someone who still owes me truth. Quote. When will you be back? When it's dark enough, he said, and left without another word. The hours that followed stretched thin. Ava slept, but I couldn't. I replayed the footage over and over, counting the seconds between each knock. Every beat sounded like a question I couldn't answer. By late afternoon, the sky turned the color of bruised steel. I found myself standing outside on the porch, the river wind cold against my skin. When I heard the gravel shift, I turned. Dominic was back, carrying a small envelope. He handed it to me. Inside were photos Rico in a dark suit, flanked by men, entering a warehouse marked Pier 11. The timestamp was that morning. He's moving faster, Dominic said. He knows someone's watching. We should tell Reed. Already did, he said. He's setting his team. The relief that rose in me was sharp and short-lived. So it ends tonight, I said. He nodded, but his expression didn't match the words. Nothing ends, he said. It just changes shape. We stood in silence for a while. The wind carried the smell of salt and rust. I wanted to ask what would happen after, but I knew he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, You trust me now? I hesitated, then nodded. Enough to be scared if you disappear. His mouth curved into a faint smile. Fear means you're alive. Keep it close tonight. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small silver cross on a chain, and placed it in my palm. Mara's, he said. She wore it the night she vanished. I found it a year later in a pawn shop. I've carried it since. Why give it to me? I asked. Because if I don't make it back, someone should remember she existed for more than the way she died. The metal felt cold against my skin. I wanted to refuse, but the words caught in my throat. I closed my fingers around it instead. He stepped closer. For a moment, the distance between us felt like something fragile that might break if we breathed too loud. His voice dropped low. When this is over, you'll write your story. Make sure it hurts. I always do, I whispered. His hand brushed my cheek just once, quick, almost accidental. Then he was gone again, back into the fog that had started to rise over the river. I stayed there until the sky turned black, clutching the cross so tightly it left a mark in my palm. Somewhere beyond the docks, the city lights blinked like tired eyes, and I whispered into the wind, Don't let tonight be the last chapter. The rain started again just before dusk, slow at first, then heavier, a steady drumming that turned the streets into mirrors. Dominic had gone to meet a contact in the city. He said he'd be back before dark, but the clock on the wall kept marking his absence, each tick an echo that grew louder than the rain. I tried to stay calm. Ava slept upstairs, her dreams restless. The house smelled of damp wood and gun oil. I made coffee I didn't drink. Every sound outside felt like footsteps. Every shadow, a shape waiting to move. Then the phone rang. A single vibration on the counter, the screen lighting up with a number I didn't know. Hello. No answer, just static and the faint sound of traffic. Then a voice I recognized, thin with pain. Elena, don't. The line cut out. I grabbed my coat and the keys to the car before my mind could argue. The city was only 20 minutes away. My hands shook as I drove, headlights slicing through the rain, wipers beating time with my pulse. When I turned the last corner onto Riverside, I saw him through the downpour. Dominic, leaning against the glass of a cafe, one hand clutching his side, the other gripping the door frame as if to keep from falling. I ran. The bell above the door jangled weakly as I pushed inside. The cafe was empty, except for a barista frozen behind the counter and the smell of spilled coffee. Dominic's coat was dark with blood. Don't, he said as I reached for him. It's not mine. That's supposed to make me feel better? I snapped, catching him under the arm. He winced but didn't pull away. I half-dragged him to a corner booth. His breath came rough, uneven. I pulled back the coat anyway, blood, too much of it, seeping through the side of his shirt. Not yours? I said. You're a terrible liar. He gave a faint grin that almost looked human. Old habit. Who did this? Rico's men. They were waiting. My contact sold me out. I took 2 of them down. The third took his turn. I pressed a towel against the wound, firm enough to make him flinch. You should be in a hospital. And tell them what? That a mafia boss got stabbed by ghosts? He caught my wrist gently. No hospitals. Not yet. You're bleeding too much. I've bled worse, he murmured. The rain hammered harder. The barista had disappeared into the back, pretending not to see us. I tore a strip from my scarf, wrapped it tight around his waist, my hands slick with blood and fear. When I looked up, his eyes were on me, steady, unreadable, but softer than I'd ever seen. You shouldn't have come, he said. You called me. I told you not to. You're terrible at giving orders, I said. He laughed once, quiet and broken, the sound catching in his throat. Mara used to say that. Your wife. She hated the rain. Said it made everything look honest. I tied the knot in the fabric, pulled it tighter. You should have listened to her. She was right about everything, he said. His hand brushed mine, cold and trembling. Except the ending. Don't talk like that. He leaned his head back, eyes closing. For a moment I thought he'd passed out, but his voice came soft, drifting. When she died, I swore I'd never let anyone close enough to make me weak again. I thought distance was strength. I was wrong. Dominic, I said quietly, look at me. He opened his eyes. The gray in them looked deeper now, storm-lit. You're not weak, I said. You're human. That's the same thing, he whispered. Not tonight. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The rain filled the silence, heavy, relentless. I kept pressure on his wound, felt the faint tremor of his breath against my wrist. Somewhere outside, a car horn echoed and faded. He spoke again, almost to himself. If we don't stop Rico tonight, he'll move the shipment early. Those girls will vanish before midnight. Then we stop him, I said. Together. You sound sure. I'm not, I said, but I'm done being afraid. He looked at me as if he were memorizing something. Then his hand moved to my face, brushing a strand of wet hair from my cheek. The touch was slow, uncertain, like he was asking permission. I didn't pull away. For the first time, the space between us felt fragile in a way that wasn't about fear. It was the kind of closeness born from exhaustion, from two people too tired to lie anymore. His voice dropped to a whisper. If I don't make it back tonight, don't, I said. He smiled faintly. I need to say it. If I don't, you find Ava. You take her far from here. Change her name. Don't look back. I can't promise that. You have to. No, I said, because you're coming back. The rain softened for a moment, as if listening. He leaned forward, the faint scent of blood and rain between us, and kissed me slow, hesitant, like someone relearning what it means to be alive. His hand cupped the back of my neck. Mine rested against his heartbeat, steady despite everything. When we pulled apart, he exhaled, a sound half pain, half relief. That's a mistake, he said. Maybe, I whispered. But it's ours. He looked toward the window where the storm blurred the city lights into streaks of gold. Tomorrow night, he said. Pier 11, one last storm before it ends. Then we finish it. He nodded, his voice fading with exhaustion. If I have to die, at least let it be for something that breathes. Gwen. I pressed my forehead against his shoulder, feeling his pulse beneath the cloth. Then keep breathing, I whispered. Outside, thunder rolled across the river, long and low. The world felt suspended, caught between one heartbeat and the next. I didn't know if the rain would ever stop, but I knew this. After tonight, nothing between us could go back to silence. The night at Pier 11 was the kind that made even the moon hide. The sky was low, swollen with fog, and the harbor lights bled into the mist like bruises. Everything smelled of oil and salt and waiting. Dominic stood beside me, a dark shape against the cold metal fence, his coat buttoned high to hide the bloodstain that hadn't fully healed. His breath came slow, steady, visible in the damp air. Reed's voice crackled softly through the earpiece. Team in position. 5 minutes until we move. Copy, Dominic said. I adjusted the small camera strapped to my shoulder. The red light blinked once, then steadied. I could see the silhouettes of the shipping containers through the fog, stacked high, endless. Each one looked like it could hold 100 secrets. Somewhere among them was 42A. Somewhere inside it, people were still breathing. Dominic glanced at me. You stay behind the first row. No heroics. I almost laughed. That's your job. He smiled faintly. Not tonight. Tonight I just keep my promise. Quote. He checked his gun, slipped it into the holster, and motioned to Reed's men moving through the shadows figures in black, silent, efficient. They fanned out along the dock, ghosts against the pale fog. My heart hammered so loud I could hear it in my throat. Reed appeared beside us, rain dripping from the brim of his cap. Once we move in, no second guessing, he said. If Rico's here, we take him alive. Dominic's jaw tightened. Alive isn't my preference. It's mine, Reed said. We do this by the book. Dominic's gaze was cold. Your book's the reason these girls were dying in the first place. Reed didn't answer. He signaled to his men instead. They moved. The raid began in silence. No shouts, no gunfire, just movement, swift and deliberate. Dominic and I slipped behind a stack of crates, the sound of boots on wet steel echoing faintly. Floodlights snapped on, slicing through the dark. There, I whispered. 42A, quote. The container loomed ahead, its red paint flaking, the number barely visible. 2 guards stood in front of it, smoking. Reed's team circled them in seconds, flashlights, weapons, orders murmured fast. The guards dropped, hands up. Open it, Reed said. A crowbar slid under the lock. The metal groaned, then snapped. The door swung open. For a heartbeat, there was nothing, just the smell of rust and diesel. Then movement. A cough. A small cry. Jesus, someone whispered. Inside were faces, pale, frightened, blinking into the sudden light. 15 of them, maybe more. Blankets, torn clothes, eyes too wide. Ava's voice echoed in my memory. He brands everything that belongs to him. One of the girls reached toward the open air, whispering something I couldn't hear. I lifted the camera. My hands trembled, but I kept filming. Proof. The truth breathing in front of me. Then a sound split the quiet, a sharp crack from the far end of the dock. A gunshot. Down, Reed shouted. Chaos erupted. Shadows moved through the fog, Rico's men, firing from the warehouse. Bullets sparked against metal. Dominic shoved me to the ground, returning fire before I even registered the motion. Stay down, he barked. Reed's men scattered, shouting orders. The rescued women screamed, crouching behind the open containers. I crawled toward cover, clutching the camera to my chest. The air smelled of cordite and seawater. Dominic moved fast, precise, like a man who'd done this too many times. He fired twice, ducked behind a crate, then shouted to Reed, "They're flanking right." Reed nodded, gesturing to his team. Another burst of gunfire. Then I saw him, Rico, standing at the end of the pier, tall, in a dark coat, smiling like this was all a game. He raised his gun toward us. "Dominic!" I screamed. The shot came before he could turn. The sound was sharp, final. Dominic stumbled back, a dark bloom spreading across his chest. "No!" I crawled to him, ignoring Reed's shout to stay down. My hands pressed against the wound. Blood soaked through my fingers, hot and slick. His eyes found mine, unfocused, the strength already fading from them. "Don't," he started, his breath catching. "Don't talk," I said, tears blurring my sight. "Save your strength." He tried to smile, failed. "You always tell me that." Reed fired again. His men advanced, pinning Rico's crew behind the warehouse. The pier was chaos sirens wailing now, the echo of gunfire swallowed by fog. I felt Dominic's pulse weakening under my hands. "You're not dying here," I said. He exhaled, a sound between a sigh and a laugh. "You'll write about this," he whispered. "Promise me you'll tell it right." "I promise," I said, voice shaking. "Then it's worth it." His hand found mine, gripping weakly. "You changed it, Elena," he murmured. "You made it." The sentence never finished. His body went still, the last breath leaving him in a shudder that felt like mine. "Medic!" Reed shouted. 2 agents ran over, dragging a stretcher. I backed away, my hands red, my heart breaking open with every beat. They lifted him. One of the girls from the container reached out, touching his sleeve as they carried him past. "He saved us," she whispered. I followed until Reed blocked my path. His face was hard, but his eyes weren't. "We've got him," he said. "He's not gone yet." I looked at the stretcher disappearing into the fog, the flashing lights painting everything blue and white. "If he dies," I said quietly, "the truth dies too." Reed didn't answer. He just nodded toward the camera still hanging from my neck. "Then make sure it lives." The pier smelled of smoke and salt and rain. Behind us, the rescued women huddled together, trembling but breathing. Ahead, the ambulance doors slammed shut. I stood there until the sirens faded, until the fog swallowed every sound. The camera in my hand felt heavier than any weapon. I pressed the record button one last time, whispering to the lens. He kept his word. The red light blinked once, then went dark. The city had already chewed up the story before I could even tell it. A week after the raid, the headline ran across every front page in Havenport. "Journalist sleeps with the devil." Quote. My name printed in bold, my face frozen mid-photograph, eyes hollow, mouth half open as if I were about to argue with a ghost. I stopped reading after the first paragraph. The paper twisted everything: how I had embedded with a crime boss, how my footage was suspiciously timed, how my relationship with Dominic Hale compromised the integrity of the investigation. They called me an accessory, a liar, a woman who lost her objectivity in a pair of gray eyes. They never mentioned the 15 women who walked out of container 42A alive. The newsroom didn't call. My editor sent a single message: take time, don't contact us until this settles. I knew what that meant: career euthanasia delivered politely. I sat in my apartment with the blinds drawn, the rain still refusing to leave Havenport. The air smelled of wet concrete and coffee gone cold. The cross Dominic had given me lay on the table, still streaked with a faint trace of his blood. I couldn't make myself clean it. When the knock came at the door, I didn't move. Then Reed's voice carried through. It's me. I opened the door to find him standing there, coat soaked, expression hard in the way guilt looks when it's trying to hide. Congratulations, I said. You saved the city. The press loves a hero in a badge. He ignored the sarcasm. They're turning on you fast. FBI's sniffing around. Internal Affairs wants to know how a suspended reporter got access to classified operations. I stepped aside. You want coffee or another headline? He walked in, dropped a folder on the counter. Dominic's in protective custody. Technically, he's alive, but they're keeping him under at Street Jude's. 2 bullets removed, one still too close to the spine. The room tilted a little. I gripped the edge of the counter. Alive? For now. I couldn't speak for a moment. The sound that left me was closer to a laugh, but it broke halfway out. Then let me see him. Reed shook his head. You can't. If they trace you there, they'll connect everything: your footage, the raid, the bodies. You'll both be buried under paperwork before he can walk again. He saved those girls. Yeah, Reed said, and you saved the evidence. But the system doesn't hand out medals for that kind of partnership. Quote. He looked around my apartment, the stacks of notes, the camera on the table, the wine glass I hadn't washed in days. You need to disappear for a while, he said. Lay low. Write nothing. Speak to no one. I'm a journalist, I said. Silence kills me faster than bullets. Then write something they can't print, he said. Something for yourself. I didn't answer. I just stared at the cross on the table, the chain coiled like a question I couldn't untangle. Reed sighed. You want the truth? Half the bureau thinks you set him up. The other half thinks you were in love with him. Both sides are probably right in some way. I turned sharply. You think I'd risk my life for a man like him? He met my eyes. You already did. The air between us went still. Rain slid down the windows, blurring the city into streaks of gray. I felt anger rise, but it wasn't for him, it was for everything I couldn't undo. He's not what they think, I said. He wasn't the villain in this story. Reed's voice softened. No one ever is, not to the person who cared for them. He hesitated, then slid a small envelope across the table. Evidence from the pier. Your footage unedited. I pulled it before the feds could. If you want to clear your name, this is your weapon. I didn't touch it. Weapons always kill something. Maybe it's time to kill a lie. He started to leave, then paused at the door. Elena, you did good. You just did it in the wrong way. When the door closed, I sat back down. The apartment felt even quieter. I unsealed the envelope. Inside was a single USB drive, the same footage I'd taken Dominic dragging open the container door, the girls blinking in the sudden light, my voice off camera whispering, "They're alive." I watched it again, slower this time. The angle caught his face for a moment: sweat, rain, resolve. Then the shot, the fall, the blur. I paused the frame there, his eyes still open, looking at something beyond the camera. Something passed me. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He asked for you. My throat tightened. I typed back before I could stop myself. Where? No reply. I sat there for a long time, listening to the storm build again. The city never stopped raining when it had something to wash away. At midnight, I left the apartment. The streets were almost empty, the lamps throwing yellow circles on the slick pavement. I didn't care about being followed. Every instinct that used to keep me alive had gone quiet. The hospital stood by the river, its windows glowing soft and sterile. I slipped through the side entrance. The security guard didn't look up. My heart didn't either. Room 314. That was the number Reed had mentioned once, too quickly to mean nothing. I found it at the end of the hall. The door was slightly open. The machines inside hummed a slow rhythm. Steady, fragile. He was there, pale, still, chest rising under the sheets. The lines of his face looked carved from something softer than stone. The smell of antiseptic couldn't hide the faint trace of him: tobacco, salt, rain. I pulled the chair closer, sat down, and reached for his hand. It was warm. "I told you to keep breathing," I whispered. "You always did the opposite of what I asked." He didn't move, but his fingers twitched slightly, like a response caught in sleep. Tears came without warning, silent and fierce. I let them fall, each one a confession I'd never dared to say aloud. I leaned close, my voice trembling. "They think you're a monster, but you're the only person who ever told me the truth without dressing it in mercy." The machine beeped steadily. I closed my eyes, pressing his hand to my forehead. "You're not allowed to leave before I finish the story," I said softly. "You promised." Somewhere outside, thunder rolled over the river again. The rain started up, hard against the glass. I stayed until dawn. When I left, I looked back once, at the man in the bed, the machine keeping time for both of us. "Don't die on me," I whispered. "Not when I've just started to believe." A month passed, though time felt like a wound that refused to close. The headlines had moved on. The papers found new villains, new scandals. The world was already forgetting the containers, the 15 names that had once filled the news with brief outrage. But I couldn't. I carried them with me, the way Dominic had carried scars quietly beneath the skin. Ava lived in a safe house under a new name. I visited her once a week, bringing books she rarely read and food she mostly pushed around her plate. Her eyes were clearer now, but still haunted. "He's not gone," she said to me one afternoon, her voice small. "Rico, he's in my dreams." I wanted to tell her dreams can't hurt you, but lies taste bitter when spoken to someone who's lived the truth. Then, one gray morning, Reed called. His voice was tense, clipped. "Rico escaped transport last night. 2 guards dead. He's disappeared." The room tilted. "You're sure?" He left a message. "What kind of message?" "For you," Reed said. A napkin folded in his cell. One word written on it: help. My blood ran cold. "He's mocking us. He's hunting you," Reed said. "And the girl, he knows where she is." I was already pulling on my coat. "Then we move her. Now," quote, "stay put, Elena," Reed said. "My team's on their way." But I'd already hung up. The drive to the safe house took 40 minutes. The sky hung low, full of unfinished storms. Every mile closer made my heart heavier. When I arrived, the front door was ajar. The silence was wrong. Too still, too polite. "Ava?" My voice sounded small. No answer. I stepped inside, gun in hand, a weapon Reed had insisted I carry, though I'd never used it. The living room smelled faintly of smoke and bleach. A chair was overturned. A photo frame lay shattered on the floor. From upstairs came a soft sound, a whimper, quickly muffled. I moved carefully up the steps, every board creaking like a warning. The hallway stretched long, dim shadows crawling along the walls. I pushed open the last door. Ava sat on the floor, hands bound, tape over her mouth, eyes wide with terror. Behind her stood Rico, tall, calm, gun in hand, smile sharp as glass. "Don't scream," he said, though she couldn't. He turned his gaze to me. "Miss Voss, you made me famous. Let her go." He tilted his head. "Do you know how long I've waited to say thank you? You gave me more attention than any syndicate could. The devil with a journalist, it's poetic." "Step away," I said, raising the gun. My hands trembled. "Now." He laughed softly. "You won't shoot. You're a writer. Writers don't pull triggers. They just record the aftermath. Try me." He took a slow step toward me, keeping Ava between us. "Dominic's dead," he said. "You know that, right? Men like him don't survive heroes like you." "Shut up," he begged before he bled out. Rico said your name like a prayer that didn't work. Something in me snapped. The sound of the gunshot filled the room before I realized I'd pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the wall inches from his shoulder. He smiled wider. Almost. Before he could fire back, the door exploded open behind me. A blur moved through the smoke. Dominic. He hit Rico hard, faster than I thought a wounded man could move. The gun clattered across the floor. Dominic slammed him against the wall, teeth bared, fury unleashed. "Still breathing," Rico gasped. "How disappointing." Dominic's voice was low, rough. "You should have stayed buried." They struggled. Fists, blood, rage. Ava screamed behind me. I kicked the gun toward her, cutting the tape from her wrists. "Run!" I shouted. She bolted past me, down the stairs. Rico caught Dominic's injured side, twisting. Dominic grunted in pain but didn't let go. The two crashed against the window. Rain and glass shattered together. I lunged forward. "Dominic!" He turned just enough to meet my eyes. For a heartbeat, everything slowed: the rain, the noise, even the fear. "Get her out," he said. "Don't." He pushed Rico through the broken window. They fell together, a blur of dark and red, crashing onto the gravel 2 stories below. I ran downstairs, heart tearing against my ribs. Outside, the rain poured harder. Rico lay twisted, motionless. Dominic was beside him, barely breathing. I dropped to my knees. "No, no, no." He looked up at me, blood mixing with rain. "Told you. I'd finish it," he whispered. "Don't talk," I said, pressing my hands over his wound. He laughed, a sound that broke and caught. "You always say that. Hold on, please." He reached for my hand, his grip weak but deliberate. "You saved her," he said. "You saved all of them. That's what matters. I'm not letting you go again." "You don't get to choose," he said. His eyes softened, unfocused. "Remember what I said, truth has to hurt. Stop talking like it's a goodbye." He smiled faintly, rain streaking his face. "It's not goodbye, Elena. It's peace." His hand slipped from mine. His chest rose once, then was still. I stayed there, in the rain, holding him as the sirens wailed closer. Reed's car screeched into the driveway. He ran toward us, shouting orders, but I couldn't hear him over the roar in my ears. Rico's body was already still, eyes open to the storm. Dominic's were closed, his face calm in a way I'd never seen. Reed knelt beside me, soaked, breathless. "He's gone," he said softly. "I know," I whispered. "He chose it." Reed put a hand on my shoulder. "You need to come with me. There'll be questions." I looked down at Dominic one last time. "He's the answer," I said. They pulled me away as the medics arrived. The world blurred, flashing lights, rain, noise, everything moving except him. As they lifted his body, I noticed something in his hand, a folded napkin, edges damp, ink smudged but still legible. One word: "Trust." I took it from his fingers, held it against my chest, and whispered, "I do." The storm broke open, washing everything clean except the ache that would never leave. 6 months later, Havenport had changed its skin again. The harbor cranes still groaned at dawn, the fog still rolled in from the sea, but the city no longer whispered the name Dominic Hale. It spoke of progress, renewal, safety, the kind of words cities use when they want to pretend they've been forgiven. I sat in the back of a cab watching it all pass by: the billboards, the blinking lights, the same streets that once felt like a heartbeat under my feet. Tonight I was returning not as a reporter, not as a witness, but as something I didn't yet know how to name. The award ceremony was held in the glass atrium of the new Civic Hall. Cameras flashed as I stepped inside. The kind of attention that once made me proud now made me want to hide. Reed was already there, looking uncomfortable in a suit. He nodded when he saw me, a small, tired smile. "You made it," he said. "I almost didn't," I replied. "They named your piece Article of the Year, The Law of Trust." "I didn't write it for awards," I said. "I know," he said softly. "That's why it won." We didn't talk about Dominic, though he was there between every sentence. He always was. When they called my name, the room fell into a hush. I walked to the stage, the lights bright, my steps slow. The plaque they handed me felt heavier than metal. It felt like an apology I didn't deserve. I stood at the microphone, the faces of strangers waiting for words that might make sense of all this. I took a breath. "I wrote about a city that forgot how to listen," I began. "About men who lived in its shadows, and women who disappeared in its silence. I wrote about trust, not the kind that lives in laws, but the kind that survives between people when everything else fails. Trust is what makes us human. It's also what breaks us. And maybe that's the only truth worth writing." Quote. The applause came slow, then built. I barely heard it. All I could think of was the sound of rain hitting the pier, the knock inside container 42A, the last breath of a man who'd promised to keep his word. Afterward, I stepped out into the night. The air was cold, clear, filled with the hum of distant traffic. Reed joined me on the steps, hands in his pockets. "You did well," he said. "I told the truth," I said. "That's all." He nodded, then reached into his coat. "Something came for you." Quote. He handed me an envelope, plain, unmarked. My stomach tightened as I unfolded it. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, taken from far away. It showed a dock somewhere in the south, sunlight glinting off the water. A man stood with his back to the camera, wearing a coat I knew too well. I looked up at Reed. "Where did you get this?" "It came through Interpol. Anonymous source. No record, no timestamp." "Do you think it's him?" He hesitated, Men like Dominic don't die easy. Quote. I turned the photo over. On the back, written in faint ink, were 2 words: keep breathing. I felt the air catch in my throat. It's his handwriting. Reed studied me for a moment. If he's alive, he's not coming back. I know, I said. That's not the point. What is? That he kept his promise. Reed exhaled, then smiled sadly. Maybe that's enough. He left me there, under the city lights that shimmered like fragments of something broken, but still beautiful. I stood for a long time, staring at the photograph until the edges went soft in the damp air. When I finally went home, Ava was waiting on the porch of the small house by the river. She looked healthier, now stronger, her hair longer, her eyes steady. She hugged me tightly, as if afraid I might vanish like the others. They opened the shelter today, she said. For the girls. We called it the 9, in memory of the table where you found him. I smiled through the ache in my chest. He'd like that. I think he already knows, she said. Inside, the house smelled of new paint and tea. On the wall hung a photo of the rescued women, smiling, their eyes bright. Ava poured tea into 2 cups and handed me one. You'll keep writing? She asked. Yes, I said, but not about death. Not for a while. We sat by the window, the river moving slow and silver under the moon. I traced the edge of the photograph still in my pocket. For the first time in months, I breathed without guilt. Outside, the wind carried the faint smell of the sea. Somewhere far away, a cargo ship's horn echoed a low, distant sound that might have been goodbye, or maybe a promise kept. I whispered to the night, you were right, truth hurts, but it heals too. And for a moment I thought I could hear a voice in the wind, calm and familiar. Breathe, Elena. The tea went cold between my hands, but I didn't mind. For the first time, the silence felt kind. A year had passed since Havenport, and the sea no longer frightened me. I rented a small house on an island far south of the city, the kind of place where time forgot to rush. The days moved like the tide, slow, deliberate, always coming back to the same quiet shore. The mornings smelled of salt and roasted coffee, and the nights were filled with the hush of waves crawling over sand. I told everyone I came here to write a book. That was partly true. The rest of the truth stayed folded inside a napkin in my drawer. Its ink faded but still readable. Trust. I wrote everyday stories about the harbor, about ghosts who whispered through fog, about women who refused to disappear. None of them mentioned Dominic by name, but he was there in every line. In the way my characters looked over their shoulders before speaking. In the way they learned to believe someone and still keep a knife within reach. Some nights, I walked to the edge of the beach where the waves curled in and whispered secrets to the sand. I would close my eyes and imagine his voice, the low, steady tone that had once said, when someone asks for help, you answer before the world decides it's too late. I kept answering, even when no one asked. The locals knew me as the quiet woman who always wrote at the same table in the cafe overlooking the harbor. Table 9. The owner, an old man with gentle hands, laughed when I requested the number. Superstition? He asked. Memory, I said. He didn't press. People who live close to the sea understand the weight of unsaid things. Each morning I ordered the same drink, black coffee, no sugar, and opened my notebook. The pages filled with half-sentences, observations, fragments of what healing looks like when it doesn't announce itself. Children running barefoot through tide pools. Fishermen laughing over bad weather. The sound of the wind rattling the cafe door like a heartbeat, reminding me I was still here. And sometimes, when the light hit the water just right, I would imagine a shape on the horizon, a dark figure, standing near the edge of a dock, coat moving with the wind, always facing the sea, never turning back. One evening, the sky burned gold before sinking into blue. I stayed later than usual, lost in words that refused to find their ending. The cafe was almost empty. The owner was cleaning tables, humming softly. When he brought my usual refill, he set it down with a small smile. Someone left this for you, he said, sliding a folded piece of paper under the saucer. My chest tightened. Who? He shrugged. Didn't give a name, just said you'd understand. The note was folded once, neatly. My fingers shook as I opened it. 2 short lines, written in careful, familiar handwriting. Table 9 is still reserved. For a moment, the world tilted. The smell of coffee, the sound of waves, the clink of glass, all of it faded beneath the sudden rush of blood in my ears. I read the words again, slower this time, as if they might vanish if I blinked too fast. The ink was fresh. The paper smelled faintly of smoke and salt. I looked toward the door, but the street outside was empty, just the fading gold of sunset spilling over the cobblestones. A ferry horn sounded in the distance, long and low. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my pocket beside the old napkin. The 2 pieces of paper felt like pieces of the same heartbeat, one that had never really stopped. When I looked up again, the horizon had gone dark, except for a thin band of orange light resting on the water. I thought of him then not as the man the world had feared, but as the one who had answered a word scribbled in desperation on a napkin and turned it into a promise. I lifted the cup to my lips. The coffee had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. The bitterness felt alive, real. A breeze swept through the open door, carrying the faint scent of tobacco and rain. My pulse stilled. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Some presences don't have to be seen to be believed. I whispered, almost smiling, "You kept your word." The wind moved again, soft against my cheek, like an invisible hand brushing hair from my face. I closed my notebook, tucked the note inside, and stood. Outside, the first stars were appearing, their reflections trembling in the dark water. The sea murmured at the edge of the island, patient and endless. I walked toward it, the sound of the waves wrapping around me like a familiar voice. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel lost. The night smelled of trust, and I finally breathed.